Hello and welcome. I'm Tracey Polowich, host of the Excellence Connection podcast, where we connect our listeners with subject matter experts, knowledge, and resources to help along the excellence journey and improve organizational performance. Today, I have Kevin Schwenker with me. He has over 35 years of consulting experience, adding value to business, government, and not-for-profit organizations. And he specializes in a variety of areas such as strategic planning and implementation of change and organizational excellence initiatives. But today we will be discussing employee engagement, which is another area of Kevin's expertise. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thanks, Tracey. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm very excited to have you. As you know, you are somewhat of a mentor to me in the past, teaching the management consulting course years ago. And then
we've known each other for quite a while now.
Yes, as a colleague with organizational excellence specialists as well. Kevin, can you please tell our listeners a little bit about your background?
Well, I mean, you gave a pretty good summary there. I've been involved in consulting to management for over 35 years. Interestingly, I have a graduate degree in international development administration, which I've actually done some work internationally, and I find it's very much like the work that I do with consulting, helping organizations figure out how to do things better. And I mean, that is the purpose of development administration, is straightening the paths of government and delivering services to customers, which are people. And that rolls right down to the work that I've been doing for the last several years in the United Arab Emirates, where they have decided they want to be the best government in the world in delivering services to their people and to the people who live in their country. So I guess, you know, a sub theme in all of the work that I've done for years is excellence. How can we do things better? And so, yeah, I've got a very mixed bag of things that I do, working in human resources, which is really my touchstone, strategic human resources, organizational performance. I teach at a local university here in the MBA program, and I'm an adjunct professor at the Sobey School of Business, where I teach what I do, which is fun for the MBA students. I probably wouldn't be very good in philosophy, but certainly in business, I can teach what I do, which is management consulting, project management, and strategic performance management. And I worked in Canada. I mean, up until the COVID, I had work all over the world, across Canada. I was actually in New Zealand working with the federal government there and professional service providers, looking at how government can get better work out of professional service providers and how professional service providers can improve the value that they deliver to government. And then had to rush back across the world and then reinvent myself when all travel was stopped. So I also do a lot of work in mentoring, which is an area that I really enjoy. I've been working for probably over 20 years, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and have a national award for excellence as a mentor, and was honored with a Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for my work with young entrepreneurs some years ago. So that's, and I also have a side hustle where I import wine from around the world. That's
awesome.
And that's something that I'm passionate about. And, you know, it sort of ties into our discussion today about employee engagement. It's really about passion at work.
Excellent. Well, let's get into it. So you have extensive experience with creating engagement with employees through your work as an HR professional and then also as a coach and mentor. Can you please explain to the viewers what employee engagement really means?
I have an excellent definition from a group called Talent Map, and it was a conference that I observed a few years ago, BC, before COVID. And it's really about a positive, energized state of mind from both a cognitive and an emotional investment of personal energy that's transforming a work task, a team goal, or an organizational outcome into a meaningful business objective, but it's also meaningful for the individual. So let me just take a step back and talk about the difference between satisfied employees and engaged employees. You know, satisfied employees feel pleasant, content, grateful, satisfied. You know, it's about what they get. Whereas engaged employees feel a sense of focus, of urgency, intensity and enthusiasm, persistence, adaptability. And it's what the employee is willing to give. It's that additional discretionary effort between doing a job and being engaged in your work, engaged and passionate about your work. So, I mean, if you go back a few years, I don't know if you've ever seen the work by Daniel Pink. He's written a book called Drive. There's a great YouTube video that I always show in my performance management class at the university. And Daniel Pink talks about research that was done by Harvard and by the Carnegie Institute, and said that, you know, while money is a driver, you just need to pay people enough money to take money as an issue off the table. And paying more money or paying, shall we say, piecework that motivates people to perform more works well in standardized occupations. And so that's why in the 60s and 70s, we saw employees looking for meaningful work is only like 23% of employees. But over the years, as work got more sophisticated, it's now 67% of employees are looking for meaningful work. And Daniel Pink talks about three things that drive engagement, that drive people today. And one of them is purpose. Do I feel like I'm making a difference in the world? Is what I'm doing delivering? Is it making me feel good? Am I feeling good about what I'm doing? The second one is mastery, and that's getting better, developing more skills, taking on, or maybe not taking on more leadership positions, but being able to use more of myself in the workforce. And the third one is autonomy. Can I make my own decisions? And you know, engaged employees have that feeling of being happy about providing discretionary effort. So it's a combination of your head, which is logical, career and finance, goal-oriented, with your heart, which is emotional, so your values align with the work that you're doing, you know, and am I feeling good about the managers and leadership that I'm working with, and am I working in that direction? And as a result, you get behavioral indicators that people are engaged, that discretionary effort, they become an ambassador for the organization. And you see that initiative and persistence in wanting to get the job done. So, you know, that was a long discussion of what employee engagement is.
No, but it's good because it really distinguishes between that satisfaction and something more. And I think we all have probably felt that something more, and you know when you've got it, but it's really hard to really pinpoint how to get it, right?
And yeah, and that's, you know, we all know that from a business perspective, engagement delivers better business results. So you get goals attained, higher levels of safety, productivity, People, attendance is consistent, retention is good, and there's public confidence in your organization. But, what's in it for the employees to provide that effort? And as you said, when we're engaged, work is fulfilling, it's satisfying, but there's also medical evidence surrounding an engaged workplace and being engaged at work, that engagement actually results in better employee health and wellness. And there's some interesting studies about this. The University College of London said that not being recognized at work increases heart disease. Whitehall's study was like senior executives live longer than lower level employees, and it's significant. Now, of course, some of that might be better health outcomes because you got more money, but it's also, the higher you are in an organization, hopefully the more engaged you are, right?
Yeah.
The University of Canberra said that a job we hate is just as bad for our health as being unemployed. And you think of the stress that people go through being unemployed, the stress of a bad job is worse. And Boston College, interestingly, linked the engagement of individuals at work and how satisfied, not satisfied, but engaged that they are with work, their passion for work reflects on their children. And the children are affected by their parents' passion at work. And if it's, if they come home and they're always angry and upset about what's going on at work, we find that the children act out at school, and it has an impact on their health and their well-being. So it's really important, not just for organizations, but for the individual.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You spend a lot of time at your job, so it's bound to affect all parts of your life. So with so much disruption in the workforce through the pandemic, I would imagine that we'll see some change in employee engagement and how employers approach that. We've, seen work from home and homeschooling arrangements, disruption to daycare, the new hybrid of model of working with some work at home, some work at the office. There's been lots of terminations due to shutdowns of business, and we're hearing about the Great Resignation. So all this commotion seems to have people rethinking about the most important things to them, about their careers and their families. And I see employee engagement maybe becoming more key over the coming months and years as everybody responds more to this new structure of work that's emerging. What do you see as some of the trends that we can expect to see in employee engagement?
Well, I guess what I want to talk a little bit about is what organizations are doing and how they're better understanding employee engagement now. And also remind me to come back and touch on who's responsible for employee engagement, because it's the answer is surprising. So over the last 2 decades, as I said, the awareness of the importance of employee engagement has been going up. If you look at things like Google Trends, and you can go in and look at what people are searching for, employee engagement is something that's looked at all over the world. It's not just North America, it's South America, it's Asia, it's Eurasia, it's, interestingly enough, in India, where you go, there's lots of people in India. However, there's not a lot of highly skilled people in India. So if they're recognizing that if they want to get the best people, they have to look at that. Another thing that, again, this whole work from home, work-life balance, raising families, historically, you've gone into work and had a career ladder. You start at the bottom, you climb the ladder to get up to manager, senior manager, partner, whatever in an organization. And now organizations are realizing that they can offer more of a career lattice. So you're not just, depending on where people are in their life, they may want to take on more responsibility, or they may want to balance family life with work life, and therefore they would move sideways or even move down a step for a moment. You mentioned to me before we started today about the concept of upskilling, learning more skills, and that's where in a career lattice that you can take sideways moves to find more engaging work or more interesting work, and use different skills and improve skills that you haven't been using in your current position. Countries like Finland are experimenting with stand-up offices, where there's complete offices where there's no place to sit down. There's places where you can lean against a wall or over top of something, and there's a Kick the Sit app that I think is available in Canada, and the Canadian government supports it. And it's about, and I need to remind myself to get up from my desk, because I can just I'm passionate about my work, I get so engaged, but I need, for my own health and wellness, sitting is the new smoking. There's actually a Jolt wristlet that's been designed in the States. This is the modern version of the cattle prod. How do you get people motivated? Well, you give them a jolt every now and then, but that may not be the sort of thing that we want to see. But I'm thinking that maybe I should get one to remind me to get up and walk around, or to drink more water, because again, that's something that we get very dehydrated in today's office spaces if we're inside doing knowledge work all the time. MIT has designed a key card, and this key card has a built-in microphone, infrared monitor, an accelerometer, right, that sees you walking around and tracks your movements, just like that's, and Bluetooth. It's connected to Bluetooth, so it can see where you visited in an organization, and it tracks people's activities and their body posture. So if you're leaning forward, right, that shows that you're more engaged in listening to what's going on, and you're, that sort of thing. And they're trying to study and understand what makes people engaged. So again, it's learning more about the employee experience. And the British government actually has Engage for Success initiative. They recognize that not only is engagement good for businesses, but it's good for the entire country, right? Health outcomes and business productivity and GDP of the entire. So that brings us back to who's responsible then for engagement, right? So we're learning more about it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what can organizations do, but it's also what can individuals do. It's not just executive and frontline managers that are responsible for making sure that you're engaged. You're responsible for your own engagement. And again, it's a two-way street. There's lots of things that individual employees can do to drive their own engagement. So the focus so far has been on ideas for executive and management and HR to make my life better, make my work better. But again, that goes back to the satisfied employee. It's what employees get. But in engagement and passion, you have to figure out what makes you engaged, what makes you passionate, and then work to develop it. So if I can, I'll give you an anecdote.
Yes, please.
I'm not going to name the organization, but there was an organization that I'd been approached by people in the organization. I knew quite a few people in the organization, and it was in really sad shape. There was a micromanaging CEO There was infighting amongst the governance, senior executive board. Terrible, terrible infighting. It was a toxic work culture. There's nothing worse than a micromanaging boss, because everything stops on their desk. And as a result, nobody makes suggestions. Nobody does any work, because they would just send it to the boss and then sit back, and because you can't move unless they approve what's going on. So we've got this toxic working environment. We've got a highly demotivated and disengaged staff. And so I went to HR, was introduced by a senior manager, said, listen, I think you should talk to this guy. So I went in and I talked to HR, and I had a number of questions to ask them, which confirmed my understanding of what was going on in the organization. And I approached them with a process of things, a number of things that they could do. So I wanted to go get a, talk with frontline people, which is interesting, because in organizations where people are disengaged, there's always that communication issue, right? People feel that they're not communicated with, they're not listened to. They know, people on the front line, and I've known this for years as a management consultant. I go in and I talk to people on the front line, and they say, well, I've been telling my manager for years that this is a problem and we should do something differently. But my manager doesn't listen. And then I present my solutions, and the senior executive goes, well, you just told us what we already knew. I said, yeah, but you haven't been doing anything about it. Right? So I suggested this. I provided some research that backed up the initiatives that I was recommending, the changes that had made in other organizations, etc. And then crickets. I heard nothing. They said, oh yeah, we'd like to see a proposal. So I got the proposal, and nothing. And then they hired a company to do an engagement survey. And they got the results back that people were disengaged. But that was what they, this is what we're doing. We're doing an engagement. It's to be seen to be doing something. They did an engagement survey. Engagement surveys in and of themselves are next to useless or completely useless, right? You have to do something about the disengagement. So
it's an assessment, right? You have to, it's just a diagnosis, and then you have to decide what you're going to prescribe and do.
Right. So there's any number of ways. I mean, so there's the classic Gallup poll. Have you seen the Gallup poll, the 12 questions that were designed by the Gallup poll? It's 12 questions to measure employee engagements. Like, do you know what's expected? Do you have the materials and equipment? Do you have your opportunity to do your best every day? Have you received recognition or praise? Does someone care about you as a person in the organization? Do you have a friend at work? Do your opinions count? Does the mission or purpose of the company make you feel, your job is important? Is everybody committed to doing quality work? Do you have a best friend at work? And all these, there's 12 questions. In the last 6 months, has someone at work talked to you about your progress? In the last year, have you had opportunities at work to learn and grow? These questions are indicative of what organizations need to do to make people feel engaged. Do you know what is expected of you at work? All right, proper job descriptions, proper processes. Do you have the materials and equipment to do your job? Do you have your opportunity to do your best? So, these things have given us indicators of what management needs to do to improve operations and improve the employee experience. Anyway.
Yeah, so that's really a lot about how employers can use performance management and talent development to improve engagement. And that's a really good idea, is using those questions as those kind of prodding points to say, this is what we need to do. How do we do that? How do we do some of these things?
Except people do the study to say they're doing something about it.
Right. And that's not enough. We've got to take it one step further and look at what are they getting at in those questions that is lacking in the organization.
Right. And I mean, there's lots of things that can talk about how, there's lots of things that an organization can do to motivate an employee. Just responding to these questions and taking actions. And I can go through a list of what those are, but what's interesting is who's responsible. Is it just the organization? And it's really a two-way street. So they did there was a study done by the American Society for Training and Development, and I don't know if you're familiar with Training Magazine, and it's one of the industrial touch points, for the profession of human resources. And it says who's responsible for meaningful work, and they came up. The biggest person responsible for it was the employee. Who was responsible for autonomy, like providing you with autonomy at work? And it's the employee and the frontline manager, almost equally. What about task variety? Well, again, the employee and the frontline manager. We talked about job enrichment, vertical and horizontal loading that allows you to expand what you do, or vertical loading, which lets you see the end product of what you're doing. Workload balance. Well, that's, again, employees were more responsible than even the frontline manager for how they got their work done. And feedback, well, that was the frontline manager or supervisor. So, on one hand, there's a school of thought that it's very much on the employee, right? If you spend your time giving the employees stuff, what are you getting in return? And there's people like Cy Wakeman out there who have reality-based leadership, who says that responsibility and accountability are what's going to get motivation. You are responsible and accountable for your work. It's the old situation of the employee comes in with a number of problems to the manager, and the employee leaves and the manager's now got all the problems. whereas Cy's point is, if you have a problem, go to the manager with your solution. And what help can the manager, what permission do you need to implement the solution? But don't go in with just a problem. Go in with a solution and how you're going to be accountable and responsible for implementing that. Another person who's very much saying that it's an employee's responsibility is Marshall Goldsmith, who was like one of the grandfathers of coaching. And he said, programs to promote engagement almost need to be turned on their head, and the employee needs to be made responsible. Again, that word responsible and accountable. So each employee could ask themselves, did I do my best to set clear goals? Why is that the manager's responsibility? Here's your, again, if you want autonomy, instead of being told what to do, here's the outcome that you need to achieve. Did you set goals to achieve that? Did I make progress toward my own goals today? What did I do my best to be happy at work today? Did I do my best to find meaning in my work? Did I do my best to build positive relationships? Did I do my best to become fully engaged? So it's a two-way street.
Yeah, I've been hearing from some employers that are challenged by a lack of ownership by their employees. And so I think those ideas are good to kind of turn that back to the employees' responsibility. Do you have any advice on how employers can implement that? Like, how can they integrate some of those changes in their organization?
Well, one simple tool is a stay interview. we've heard about exit interviews, but that's too late. The employee's gone.
Right.
But the stay interviews is a one-on-one, structured discussion that's meant to stimulate employee thinking, build trust, includes action. There's less pressure on employees because it's informal, but it's structured. It's not a performance management discussion as much as it is a focus on the positive. And so what it is between a manager and employee that identifies and reinforces the factors that make the employee want to stay at work, that drive retention and drive engagement. So, you start off by having an introduction. You sit down and say, hey, what's going on? And then you identify factors that make the employee want to stay engaged. So I don't know if you remember when we were doing the management consulting training, I talked about the plus delta. What's going well? And then you turn your complaints into what could we do differently? And I said it's a great way to debrief after a client meeting. You've just presented a client with a proposal and you go, oh my God, why did I do that? Or why did you let me do that? The negative thoughts that come out as a natural human reaction to a meeting that may not have gone exactly the way we wanted it to. And it's like, okay, stop. Everybody gives a plus. What went well? And then everybody turns their problems with the meeting into what would you do differently next? Because we can't go back in the meeting and change what happened.
Right.
We can improve for next time. And it's a similar concept. So what are the factors that engage you at work? So what are the positive stay factors? What reasons do you give others for why you work here? What do you tell people that you like to do? What would make it the best work of your life? What would make this the best job? What would improve your job impact? What would give you more meaning? What would make your job more meaningful? When do you feel that you're using all of your skills? So what activities are you engaged in? And what makes you feel that you're listened to and valued? Or when have you been listened to and valued? So again, it's having the employee talk about what's going well. And then you want to talk about what are the positive factors that might improve your retention and engagement. So what could we do to make you feel better managed or managed differently? What could you do in your job that would build in more of the positive elements and fewer of the less desirable elements of your job? What would we do to make this job or this project your dream job or your dream project? Where would you like to be in a few years? What could we do to add more challenging factors to your work? How do you like to be recognized? A lot of recognition programs are built by HR people sitting behind a door going, or executives going, wow, let's give out people golf balls. And there was one organization that had all male-oriented sports things as rewards for their sales force. And that really wasn't engaging the women on the sales force at all. Would you like to have more exposure to senior management? Right? What learning, growth, and leadership desires do you have? And then the last thing is, are there any triggers that may cause you to leave? Right? So and so left last month, and I know you were close with them. Like, what did you think about that? What did you think about their reasons for leaving? Did they resonate with you? And what about recent frustrations in the last couple of weeks? What's really frustrated you about work, systems, processes, that sort of thing? So that's a stay interview. And again, it builds trust. You listen to the employee. It's simple, it's inexpensive, and it allows you to do the plus delta. What are you enjoying? What can we do to make it more enjoyable for you?
Yeah, so it's really a lot about communication. And I imagine similar to the Gallup poll, if you're going to do these stay interviews, you're going to want to take some action based on the results of them as well, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's the more formal one-on-ones. And again, one of the biggest problems that I see in organizations and in communication today is that, and this goes to change management as well, because I talk a lot about this in change management. Most senior managers are, intellectual in their approach to communications. And it's a difference between men and women too, is if what I say is what is to be done. Whereas all the people that are working for you are feeling, right? What does this make me feel about my work? And so if you send out an email, or you do have a town hall or a meeting where you're sending out information, and there's no give and take, whereas a one-on-one allows you to have that, build that communication, and employees get more out of these one-on-ones with their direct supervisors than they get out of the town halls or the meetings or the emails. I mean, I don't know what your inbox looks like, but I'm dealing with 100, 200 emails a day, and it's insanity. So one-on-ones, so how often should these be? Well, again, it depends on your span of control and how many people you manage. But, if you're running a team, you should meet with everybody on your team individually. And this is especially important today with the remote work. You need to have that, pick up the phone, have a Zoom one-on-one with the individual, with your team, rather than just the team meetings. And it should be everyone, not just some of your team, but everyone on your team. They shouldn't be held in public. They should be in private, and maybe it's in a coffee shop or somewhere where you're not necessarily going to be overheard, but you don't want to make the other person feel uncomfortable either by shutting the door to your private office, that sort of thing. And it should be a maximum of 30 minutes or less. Now, if you've got 100 employees, this would be all you do.
Yeah.
But that's what managers do. They have to manage people, and so maybe it's monthly or bi-weekly, depending on your span of control. And you spend 10 minutes for them, 10 minutes for you, and 10 minutes on career growth and development. Right? So what's going on with you? And if you build these in regularly, then the employee knows that once a week they're going to get a shot with the boss to talk about the little frustrations that they had during that week. And rather than interrupting the boss with questions, they can save it up for that once a week meeting, and they know that they're going to be listened to. They get 10 minutes. And one of the things that I say, it's important to be engaged with people, but if they see you writing things down as well, and when you meet with them next time, they come back and say, and I promise to get back to you on these things, and you get back to them, again, that builds trust, belief in the two-way communication, and you know that you're getting listened to. And then as a manager, what do you need to communicate? What behaviors are you looking for? What projects are coming up? What's going on in the projects? What organizational issues, news, efforts, changes are coming down the pipe? What meetings have I just attended with senior people in the organization that I should share the news with? What did I learn in these meetings? And what are common items I need everybody to understand on my team? Schedules, projects, workload, that sort of thing. What positive feedback can I give? Again, this, praise is an underutilized aspect, and it's best if it's immediate. So in a weekly meeting, or better even yet, if you can catch it, you can praise people in front of their peers for something they've done. But at the Christmas party, saying, "I really appreciated how you handled that customer complaint in September." That's not cutting it. So what constructive or corrective feedback do I need to give? Is there something that I can delegate to this person that would expand their work without, that would help them develop new skills? Or, and we'll discuss it with them. And then 10 minutes to cover career growth and development. What can I do to support you? And then you'd have a tracking sheet that said, and one of the things that I always do is learn a little bit about people, their kids, their pets, their dogs. And I remember years ago, and I'm still terrible at people's names, but I can remember how many kids they have, if they have a pet. These are things that, they say we remember things that are important to us, and these individual, their name is probably people's most important thing for recognition, but if you can remember their kids and their dogs and their cats and their activities and their hobbies, that also helps to build rapport and a relationship. And so what did they talk about? What did we talk about? Again, your section would be filled with what do you need to communicate? And then what did I agree to do? So the next time you get together, you say, and here's what I agreed to do. Here's what you agreed to do. How are we doing? And this is not a lot different than mentoring relationships. Although in the mentoring relationship, it's the mentee's responsibility to keep track of this. So
I really like that. It's a very proactive approach and really sets the tone of trust and confidence and all those things that you want to instill between the employer and employee. And it really starts to touch on another question that I had for you regarding alignment. So in organizational excellence, we talk about alignment and keeping all of the organizational purpose and vision aligned with everything that's done in the organization. And I just wanted to ask you if there's any specific strategies that employers can use to help align individual and organizational needs for excellence.
Well, certainly a lot of it goes back to finding out what engages employees, what jobs, activities make them feel good about where they're working. But it also goes to organizational culture, which is a huge issue. I remember I was coaching a management consultant, and they were talking about proposals and winning proposals and losing proposals, and this person talked about an opportunity they had to go into a very old company, and it was a culture change assignment. And it was to happen in 6 months. And I just started laughing. It's an old company. I'm not going to say how old it is. The job was to change the culture in the organization in 6 months. I'm going, that's crazy talk, number one. Number two, I'm so happy you didn't get the job, because it would have been a disaster. And, as consultants, we sometimes have to know when to walk away from crazy jobs. But I mean, culture change is possible, absolutely. And, it's a huge part of organizational change management, doing things differently. And it's a huge thing of what we do in organizational excellence, doing things differently. And it all stems from culture. And, I have a definition here is like, it's a pattern of shared basic assumptions, that the group learned as it solved problems. That's worked well enough to be considered valid and therefore to be taught to new members as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to those problems. So it's our behaviors. You know, there's norms, which are good versus bad. There's assumptions about how things work around here. There's values, right versus wrong. But the artifacts are the visible behaviors that we see. So if we want to change things in an organization, we need to change people's behaviors. And that takes time. We can change knowledge quickly. We can give them new ways to do things. But people have to act. So it's a little individual behaviors. So, you know, what comes first? What's the first behavior that you do? And you think about an action that can help. Who will see it? Can it be copied? Will anyone who sees it have the skills and the permission to be able to do it? And so in change management, we talk about absorptive capacity. People's, you know, you can only change so much, but people have to have the skills to do the new behaviors before you can implement the new behaviors. But what often happens first is that we implement the change and then we're running to catch up to get those behaviors changed. So, you know, there's what worked well in the past, what's working now, and what's going to work in the present. In the now, we have to do these little behaviors that will change the culture of the organization. And things that stay interviews, one-on-ones, are the little behaviors that build trust and competence and are not expensive to do, but will change the future culture of the organization. And the one other thing I want to talk about was job crafting. And this is about three areas. And I mean, this is studies and work done at the University of Michigan. And they talked about task crafting, which is changing activities involved in your job. So it can be more or fewer tasks, expand or diminish in your scope, or altering the way tasks are performed. And I mean, again, this very closely aligned with organizational excellence. As organizations grow, they start adding bodies. They had a process that worked when they started, and then they add bodies and glom things onto the process to make it continue to work. And what we do often is we go in and say, well, okay, if you had to, there's a problem in this area. There's a problem with this process. If you had to do it over again, is that how you do it? You know, there's organizations who stay stuck in the past. Culture will never change. But how you deliver that task is basic business process reorganization. But what you want to do is give your employees the permission to identify different ways to do things and innovate. And you can't do that if you don't listen to them, you don't give them the permission to act. And so again, the concept of job crafting, and you can hold workshops on how can you alter the way tasks are performed in your own job. And then relationship crafting, you know, change the nature and extent of your interactions with other people. Who do you interact with now? Who gives you energy? Who's an energy succubus? You know, and you know, in life, you don't want to hang around with those people that drag you down. Hopefully it's not your manager. that's, you know, an issue that organizations, again, from an organizational and senior management perspective, can change by developing managers who are not micromanagers or suck energy from their, or are command and control freaks. So that's the organizational responsibility, but then you can give individuals a responsibility to craft the relationships they're involved with. And then there's the cognitive crafting. It's, you know, changing the way you think about the purpose of your tasks or your relationships on the job as a whole. And so, you know, it's behaviors, motivators, and work energizers that you can look at and again, it's a tool that if you encourage it, then and support it, I mean, it's happening anyways. People avoid things they don't want to do. People avoid people they don't want to deal with. But if you can engage with people and support it, it becomes more engaging. So those are three small things that you can do that are small behaviors that can change the culture of an organization to be more engaging. And the other one is meetings. Oh my God. We spend so much time in meetings, as you know. And meetings should be for decisions, not status updates. I mean, it's good to share what's going on, but you know, people need to come to a meeting prepared. So if somebody writes a report, should be, you know, there should be a report with details, but a quick summary. Here's a status. It's like in project management, we have status reports. But the meeting should be for a decision. What is the outcome? I've talked about, and again, when we were training in consulting, I talked about the OARR, outcomes. At the end of this meeting, what will we have achieved? Now, that's the biggest depressant and time suck to have a meeting that doesn't have a purpose, right? You get the meeting and everybody just talks. No, what is the outcome? And then you set up the agenda to achieve that outcome. You talk about the rules, about being prepared in advance, reading the status. And so instead of talking about status, we talk about discussions that are looking forward, what's coming up. And then clear decisions are made and team members are given permission to engage and implement fully the decisions that are made in the meetings. Again, that's a small change from a meeting where everybody comes in and everybody talks about what happened last week, right? There is nothing more boring than sitting in a meeting where it's all status updates.
Yes, I just read an article that Suresh Lula wrote about the cost of poor quality in meetings, and he talks exactly about the things that you're referring to. And you know, there's very simple things, just like you provided the OAR that can be implemented, and it just changes the whole dynamic of the meeting and the result, right?
Yeah. So where employee engagement is going is about the work experience. We're talking about engaging the whole person at work. And what's beginning to be talked about and probably the number one source in human resources is Josh Bersin. And if you haven't heard of Josh and you're involved in HR, do a Google and go find that man. Go find what he's talking about, because he is at the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of what's going on in human resource management and development, and the technology that's supporting new approaches in human resource management and development. And it talks about creating the irresistible organization. And it's about meaningful work. And we talked about that: autonomy, job and team fit, small, agile teams, time to focus, rest and recover. So meaningful work, hands-on management with clear goals, regular coaching and feedback, empowering leadership that's capable, and transparent, simple performance management, like the one-on-ones, like the stay interviews, like job crafting, like giving praise. But it's a huge issue. We don't train managers to be managers. I teach a performance management class, not corporate performance management, but human performance management in the MBA CPA program at St. Mary's University at the Sobey School of Business. And the first thing I ask these students that come in, they're all going to be accountants. They're training to be CPAs. And they got this HR course. I go, how many of you guys are going into HR? One or two of them might raise their hands. And it's like, okay. So you're probably wondering why you're in this course. I said, so how many of you are going into management, expect to go into management? Everybody raises their hands. Yeah. Welcome to HR. Right? What do you think a manager does? But they're not trained with the tools and techniques to manage people in many instances. So a positive environment, so hands-on, well-trained management that knows how to manage people. Positive environment, tools and systems to get the work done, appreciation, flexible workspace, hybrid team work, remote, inclusive, diverse culture of belonging, health and well-being, concerned about safety and fitness and mental health and family and financial support, opportunities for growth, facilitated through job and role mobility. I talked about the lattice earlier rather than the career ladder. Career growth through multiple paths, formal and informal learning, a culture of learning at all levels, and then trust in leadership, right? The mission, the purpose, transparency, empathy, continually investing in people, focus on society and the environment and the community. And that's a holistic, irresistible organization, which brings us to the employee experience that organizations need to bring to the table today. Often HR is built into a series of individual tasks. So there's somebody responsible for recruitment and onboarding, and somebody responsible for management, and then somebody responsible for training and development. And so it becomes siloed. Like any organization that's siloed, you're not going to engage people, right? That's one thing that we know is the old-fashioned approach. And more as organizations become projectized, there's a lot of cross-functional work that needs to be done. So we need to have agile organizations that work that way. And so we have to think of the employee engagement and the employee experience as cradle to grave, from when we bring them on to how we treat them while they're there, and you know, that we care about them when they're outside of work. And so you have organizations like Workday that has a global impact and employee life foundation. I mean, these are large businesses, but again, this can be replicated in a small business as well, where you're looking at Workday. They have this organization that looks at volunteering, right? Supporting people to volunteer in their community, because if they're not, you know, sometimes people's meaning is out, you know, meaning in life can also be outside of work, right? So support them for volunteering. Deloitte has 13 Deloitte days where you do not go into work. The work is closed, and you'd go do what you want to do, right? Volunteer, work in a soup kitchen, do something outside, you know, family days, extra family, whatever. Employee programs that have perks and are fun. Health and well-being, you know, fitness, mental health, those sorts of things. Environmental impact, huge concern of the millennials and the zennials that are coming into, you know, the Gen Z that are coming into work. They want a world that exists 40 years from now. Philanthropic investments, you know, looking at how can the company invest in good things in the community and worldwide. And then opportunity on-ramps, where they're looking at eliminating hiring barriers for persons with disabilities. I mean, the new word is idea: inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And on the other things, sociability and health and well-being is ESG, environment, society, and governance. Right. So that is the future of employee engagement. Is it's a whole employee experience, building an employee experience that results in engagement. And engagement, we went back to the beginning. The definition is that discretionary effort, passion, and enthusiasm at work.
That's a very good summary of the whole gamut of engagement. I really appreciate all of the information that you've shared, Kevin, today. It's, I think, going to be very helpful for our listeners and viewers. I have one last question, and that is, how do you remain in the growth zone? What do you do to deepen your growth mindset?
Interestingly, I talk about, I teach in the university for fun. It's like, and it's fun. I mean, I love working with young people. You know, the MBA program has a mix of fresh out of undergrad and some grizzled veterans, and, you know, 2 or 3, you know, somewhere in between. And I love working with them, and I love the opportunity that they give me to learn and grow. But it's also paid professional development, because I have to keep ahead of the curve. I have to keep researching. I have to keep finding new peer-reviewed research. I have to keep finding new ways to, new tools and approaches. So that alone keeps me engaged and motivated to learn more and to keep ahead of my students, which makes me a better management consultant, because then I'm always coming in with fresh ideas as opposed to same old, same old.
Right.
So it improves both. And again, we talked earlier before we came on today about teaching and taking on initiatives that force you to grow and learn new things in order to do them. You taking on this podcast is a perfect example of you developing new skills, and also, you know, the questions that you ask bring you new answers and new information and new ideas. But you need to prepare to go into these interviews, which I really appreciated the questions that you sent me in advance, which helped me prepare and made me think through what we could talk about today. So that I read vociferously, not so much books anymore, but I attend online workshops as often as I can to learn new ideas. I have subscriptions to a dozen management journals and professional, professional educational journals, but also I get newsletters and emails, and I guess a lot of e-newsletters from practitioners or practitioner organizations in every area that I claim expertise to, or that I like to learn more about. And generally, I try to set a goal of learning something new or getting involved in something new every year. So this was a learning opportunity for me.
Well, good. I thank you so much, Kevin, for your time today and for joining me. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with all of us.
Well, I probably didn't give you as much time to talk today because you had me so well prepared with your questions in advance that I just was ready to talk about all those things. But I really enjoyed being here today, Tracey, and as always, a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye for now.